Hello! And you might have noticed something slightly different there. Well, I received, somewhat before, a day before recording this episode, the slightly sad news for someone of my generation that Sir Clive Sinclair had passed away. And, well, yes, at least he'd reached a good age. He was also suffered from cancer, which is slightly a shame for some years. But with a week coming up where we're doing mostly Roller Coaster Tycoon, I thought I'd slip in just before that and record kind of a special tribute episode. Because if it wasn't for Sir Clive and those other early home computer pioneers, Chris Curry, Sophie Wilson and others, I probably wouldn't be playing this game. So, I feel I owe them a debt, either for the gaming or for my career as a programmer. Because, of course, probably one of the influential things on me at a young age was this idea that computers were a thing that you could program. Speaking of programming, shall we have the puppies again? Right. That puts paid to that. You'd think they would run out of road vehicles at this point, but no, apparently not. Apparently we're just going to have endless road vehicle accidents. Fine. Let's go get something done. Let's go do something useful. So, firstly, I'm going to bring up the cargo flow legend, because that is where pretty much all of my troubles seem to lie. And it looks okay. Oh, no. I'd said it looks okay. It looks terrible round here. This is where we have problems. So, Clifton West, and it's really the local trains going between Clifton, Western Supermare, and also Minehead. So, I'm probably not going to solve this with trains. This is a thing that I have to accept, that trains are not going to be the solution for this. What we need is something that is going to just truck away at high capacity and deliver lots of passengers. We already did this for Clifton to Bristol, where we had buses. Yes, it's boating time. Let's check that I can still build boats. Yes, I can build lots of boats. Good. So I'm going to get on with that, and let's get on with the act of paying some tribute. So, I guess for me, I am slightly too young to be part of the peak home computer era. That's very unusual for me to get to say that. You know, there aren't many things where I get to say I was too young for that. Maybe sort of the Paleolithic era and the invention of fire, was only really a toddler when those happened. But no, I missed out on that real sort of being there at the core and actually being the kind of teenager and programming these. By the time I was a teenager, it was much more the Amiga, Atari ST, and of course the PC were the things of choice. Yeah. There we go. I can't do this. And then, of course. Yes. Where was I going before I started failing to do anything useful with my life? Sitting here talking at a computer with puppies on the screen. No. So I didn't really have that experience of a sort of formative experience of sitting there programming BASIC on these things, and that wasn't a thing that happened for me. Where I did have the formative experience. Ooh, could I flood this? That might be interesting. Yes, so we should have a kind of inlet channel here. Yes, let's do some flooding. Ooh, not sure I like that. Okay, let's temporarily flood this then. And this isn't working out. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Interesting thing is that's... Well, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a supply of water here, which will be infinite. So yes, so I was too young to be in that sort of era of probing basic on these things and sort of trying to map rubber keys to commands and all of that other thing. You know, that was slightly before my era. So, but one thing that kind of did happen quite a lot was that a lot of people I knew had Spectrums. We weren't a Spectrum household. We had an Acorn Electron, and it was also a bit past its best by the time I got to play around with it. Suffered a lot. All of these things were so. Before we go too far, let me set the context of Britain in the 80s. So, kind of through the 70s, very much, even probably not like sort of super wealthy families, but even kind of fairly ordinary, sort of what you would assume from the 80s would have been kind of lower middle class, you know, sort of families, shopkeepers and things like that, were a lot poorer. And they went from, in the 70s, kind of going, well, I feel well-to-do, I own 3 chairs, and I can afford to put light bulbs in almost all of my downstairs rooms. This is unimaginable luxury. To, through the 80s, suddenly going to, well, now we've got a stacking hi-fi system and a home computer, and we have a sideboard full of cut crystal glass. And the thing is with that is, Britain as a country did not economically go overnight from, you know, that sort of we can barely afford furniture. What? Oh, that's going to go really badly for the AI. That AI has not done something sensible there. Oh dear, oh dear. Foolish AI. You should not have done that. Yes. Back to my story. Back to what I was talking about. So, where were we? So, yeah. So a lot of this stuff had to be made very cheaply. And there's some quite famous things about that around the business called Radners, who made a lot of the jewellery and the cut glass and things like that. So basically, the one thing that nobody really ever wanted to admit was that a lot of this stuff was pretty much junk. It was not very good. It was made cheaply and nastily, and because yes, people still weren't that well off, and so to go from sort of having nothing to that sort of thing of, oh, you could buy a turntable, partly came about because people like Lord Sugar, or just Alan Sugar as he was back in the time, figured out how to make these things very, very cheaply. And Sir Clive Sinclair was an absolute master of this, working out how to take something which was very, very expensive and to produce it for a very affordable price. Often in... Oh, I've annoyed them a lot, haven't I? Often in sort of kit form, or... No, so you actually had to assemble it yourself. I think the calculators and watches were sold like that. So the first thing that Sinclair kind of rose to prominence with was in the era where calculators were a must-have kind of executive thing. You know, this sort of wow, the power you could have over numbers if only you had your own calculator. That's that sort of thing. But they were very expensive, and bear in mind this was an era where there were only 3 television channels, and the only thing you could listen to was records, pretty much. So calculator obviously was a very thrilling and exciting device to have. Oh, Western Supermare doing my tree peninsula, my tree peninsula. Is this not doing so well? Oh, yep. So a calculator is a very exciting thing to own, but it was also a very, very expensive thing to own, because this was really early in the era of making microchips. Even a simple microchip that drove a calculator was catastrophically expensive. And what Sinclair did was to go, well, you could kind of cheat here. You could say, rather than a calculator having to be this incredibly clever, multifaceted chip, what if we minimize the number of instructions that are needed by making all sorts of approximations, by kind of reducing the number of different things that this chip has to do, which means it has fewer transistors, which means it is much, much cheaper to build. Minehead's coastline is going to have to change. And so the Sinclair calculator came out, and it was a lot less accurate than the HP calculators at the time. It was a lot slower. But Clive Sinclair at that time had done something quite incredible, which is that he'd made a device which was very expensive, very much for the kind of wealthy and elite. And he had made it affordable. Now, one of the issues with this making it affordable, it affected both Sinclair stuff and Amstrad stuff to a degree as well, but Sinclair stuff really suffered from it. Was maybe some of the things that were removed or cheapened or sort of cut to the bone to make it affordable were things which were kind of needed for long-term reliability. So Sinclair kind of had this reputation early on as a company which made very, very affordable, but also very unreliable electronics. And so that carried forth into the home computers. So home computers in the very start of the 80s were, again, just completely unaffordable for the average person. So even the kind of basic sort of Commodore PETs and things like that, where they were sort of over £600, the only people you knew who had a computer in 1980, or, well, given my age, the only people knew who had a computer in a cupboard which they had bought in 1980, were the ones who were very, very well off, because these things were kind of £600 plus, and inflation means that's a lot more. That's basically the price of a good second-hand car for something which cannot really do very much, because they'd only have about a kilobyte of RAM. No, you wouldn't be playing Transport Tycoon on one. You might at best be able to write a program that prints the words Transport and Tycoon on screen, if there's enough resolution to do it. Will I get away with this? Yes, I will. Very slow construction with this right. So I think maybe when we get to Oakhampton, do we need things at Oakhampton? Well, let's go with no. Let's just make this kind of Minehead and the surroundings. This is going to need improving, I think. So this is not going to be a very fast route. So what I might do here is put in some more boys. So we have some things that are in the early on. So we have the Sinclair calculator. Boy. And there now we're getting to the story of the Sinclair ZX80. So the ZX80, Sinclair's first computer, was really a masterpiece, but also a horror in terms of what you could remove from the computer and what shortcuts you could take and still get away with it. It's also SimpleAI made a digital watch as well, so we'll put that in. An absolute masterpiece in what you could get away with, and did some astonishingly horrible things. And so, for example, one of the things, like, just use the CPU to drive the video circuitry. It means that when you're trying to output video, the CPU's having to do it, and so you don't get much time to do CPU instructions. But guess what? That makes the video output circuitry a lot cheaper. So the ZX81 was pretty cheap. I think something like £80 when it came out, which tiny compared to the cost of other computers, and kind of ordinary people could afford one. And that was, they started to have a few sort of, particularly maybe students, whatever, would buy one thinking, yes, this is great, I can use it for my coursework. And then the next computer along was the ZX81. So, see how these go. These, I need to timetable these. Move this up above the puppies. Oh, I've probably been building below the puppies, haven't I? Oh dear. Well, I still have news about road vehicle crashes, so we're not getting rid of the lovely puppies just yet. Should timetable these ships. In fact, I think you can even see that on screen now that it's all going wrong there. So the ships can stay for 7 days, I think, at each one. So this should hopefully improve the capacity a bit. Where was I? Completely losing track. So yes, the ZX81 had, this sort of was just an evolution. A lot of it was kind of ZX80 based, but brought on the new. Our network's starting to fail. What's gone on here? Why is that stopped? This is just terrible. This is awful station design. I failed consummately. I was so keen to get this out of the way last episode that it's gone wrong. It's gone wrong horribly. FarmThings 21 is lost. I can't find my FarmThings 21 is lost. Yes, I've caused a bit of a disaster with that. Maybe I should not have done that. Maybe I should have actually fixed the problem properly rather than not really fixing it. Oh dear. So yes, ZX81 came along, and it's kind of the same thing, black and white output for using video circuitry for using CPU for video circuitry, all that stuff. But came with the thing that it came with a big RAM upgrade, the infamous RAM pack, which meant that you could now have 16K, and suddenly going from 1K in a computer to 16K, it's like, this can now do quite useful things. I know this seems like horrific when you're streaming this. I mean, your 16K is going past in a matter of milliseconds or whatever. There's some sort of, we're sending 16K across the web multiple times per second. And then there's a computer which that's all you got. But that's sort of, early 80s, things primitive. Things were not the same level to where they are now. So yes, more people bought ZX81s. Then in 82 came a computer that was going to be the ZX82. Come on, how is this fixed in Clifton now? Kind of. Bournemouth is a disaster. Oh no, Bournemouth. Because that blocked the trains, I had a good old-fashioned network clog. There we go. So yes, the ZX82 was going to be the next evolution, but the ZX82 came with a very big advancement, which was colour. Horrific, garish, nasty colour, and also colour that, in order to make it cheap, in order to make it very, very sort of affordable colour that if you tried to put two things on the same area of the screen or close to each other, which had two different colours, one colour would overwrite the other. The infamous Spectrum attribute clash, thing which gives Spectrum games their appearance. And so, the thing with that, the real killer was that at a time when other computers were selling for, why are there no trains there? That worries me. At a time when other computers were selling for kind of £400 or so, inflation adjust it's still, it's less than they were at the start of the decade, but still a second-hand car, if not a very good one that's going to break down all the time, a bit like one of those early 8-bit computers. Yes, so why is this? Why is this like it is? Well, that seems like it's okay. I don't know whether those. Every time I go, are they timetabled? And I find they're not. Okay, let's have a look. See, how are we doing? See, nothing is claiming to be saturated, but I know it is. I don't know why that gets like that. Should we have some things which go to the oval? Well, I don't know. Actually, is that? Oh, this is more problematic. I think we have a problem somewhere. Yes, we do. We have an immense problem. That should serve you right for going on about spectrums. If suddenly the network has broken down, it's all gone horribly, horribly wrong. And the bottleneck appears to be here, which is fittingly enough at the 2-litre Voxel Omega junction. I don't know whether that's just goods trains or whether that is indicative of a bigger problem. This is awkward because the AI has made a mess here. It has made a colossal, bothersome mess while I'm trying to explain the ZX spectrum. So yes, the ZX spectrum added colour, but more importantly, it added a very competitive price. It added, I think it's something like 125 for the base version and 175 for the fancy 48K version. Oh, I possibly should have checked that before recording this, shouldn't I? Yes, less said about your lackadaisical research habits, the better. Okay, fine. This is why we have to have puppies, because they keep building roads in the way, and then I can't get round them. Yes, so this computer was still relatively expensive. I mean, modern inflation adjusted, it's still quite a chunk of money, but was in that world of, yes, it is finally affordable to the average man on the street, the average sort of, person who might. Wait, and so they ended up in huge numbers of homes. And so that's, of course, how I started encountering them as a young child. And the thing with those was, as a young child, people, the 80s were kind of weird culturally because there was still as I say, that's that fact that we had just recently upgraded the country. We had gone from a mere 3 television channels to an exciting and intrepid 4 television channels. It was very, very, it was very, very, yes, well done, well done. This is why you're not doing this professionally as documentaries. You get half the facts wrong and then you describe something as very, very, but yes, we've got to 4 television channels, but even so, that was still quite a homogeneity of culture. So, and the culture very much, like, did you see the comedy show that was on last night, and do you like football? And, well, I was probably too young for the did you see the comedy show that was on last night, television delights of... I didn't watch that much television as a sort of young child. I guess probably Bagpuss, I suppose, but Thomas the Tank Engine, there we go. We know that. We know that from my last series, that I spent a lot of time watching Thomas the Tank Engine. It's all starting to become clear now why I'm sitting here playing a transport game. But yeah, it's kind of... If you had a child, and I didn't like football, I sort of... Just no. Like this... I can kind of get that, yes, it's enjoyable to watch a sport, but the all-encompassing, it was the sole conversational topic for 20 years of my life. And every time you met someone new, that was the only thing they tried to engage you in, was just... No. No. Please, don't. But yes, so when you went to somebody's house, and they were like, well, you've got this small child that you kind of... You can't talk to them about football. It's like, well, we don't really know what to do with them, but we do have a Spectrum over in the corner, so they can go and play on that. And so that's kind of how a lot of my earliest exposure to computer games was that being at relatives' houses where they didn't really know what to do with you, but they did have a Spectrum that they could plonk you down at. And so... And being kind of a car-mad child, especially when I encountered things like Checkered Flag, which Checkered Flag, I just had no idea what to do with it. Was a case of, can I demolish that? Yes. There's a case, I trundle around the circuits of first gear and then crash, but because it's some so formative experience that you could have these computers and you could use them to pretend to be in a car and so on. And suddenly when I got to the PC era, and the games there became a lot more sophisticated in terms of driving, and that really took off a kind of fascination with computers, and the fascination with saying, well, can I program my own? And guess where are they going with that? Well, yeah, this was the thing that the spectrums in the electrons and things like that really, it's kind of hard to really state this impact in an era when a lot of people would have just started with a Pentium PC and it would have had Windows 95 on it, and that was kind of it. But it was a sort of... It was so... Can I explain? Can I explain here what the important distinction was? That when you bought your Windows 95 Pentium, whatever, it didn't come with a basic programming manual. When you went and bought your PC magazines, so where they're business software or games magazines, they didn't come with listings in the back saying, "Oh, hey, you could learn to program this." Whereas all of the 8-bit era computers did. They all booted straight up into BASIC, and they all had magazines where they gave you program listings to type in at home. It was very, very much this view that the computer was a thing you could program. It was a thing you could manipulate. You could put programs into this thing as data just as easily as you could put documents or things like that. And so one of the sort of the surrounding context is it had people who had these computers, parents and relatives and friends who... I love that little section around there. I spotted it last video when I was doing the editing. And no. Yes, you had people that your dad would have tried to write a basic program. Dad might even have succeeded at writing a basic program. And this sort of view that the computer was a malleable thing, and very much you'll find a lot of people who had exposure to that 8-bit era and then later went on to become programmers. That will be their kind of overriding memory of it, was this idea of the computer as a malleable thing. And this is why, getting back to the original tribute that this episode was set by, this is why Sir Clive was such an important figure to people of that generation, and to people who were influenced by that generation and those computers being around, which was that he took something which would have been just purely a rich person's toy. I still haven't solved that problem. I still haven't solved Bournemouth. And there's something which would have been purely a sort of rich kid's toy, and you would have a situation where now in programming you'd go, oh, who are the programmers? Well, they were all the people who were really very, very rich, and their parents could afford to buy them computers at an early age. And really democratized it. And democratized it was something that was, in a lot of ways, pretty awful. The sort of slightly unpleasant feeling keys and things and whatever, but still democratized it, still got this idea that here is a computer, this is a thing you can program, you can make it do whatever you want, into a lot of households in that decade. And so that's the thing that I think when people go back to, they say, Sinclair and his crazy arse electric car. So the problem really is the throughput at Bournemouth Woods. This is the ultimate issue here, and really needs an extra platform to be truly efficient. Oh, and that it's stuck in between this sawmill. This is not a good situation. I'm going to have to build one of my awful stations, aren't I? It's one of those stations where it's just, what are you doing, Timberwolf? Oh, that should do. That should do. We're going on for a while. But then I do want to go on for a while with this, because as I say, I think it is important to go through and really talk about the impact on a lot of people's lives that kind of, which is very blunt, really, just doing business was. I don't necessarily think that Clive, or certainly not Sir Alan, later Lord Sugar, even really set out to do this kind of great democratization of the computer. I think they set out to go, there's a business in making things very cheaply and in providing them to people. I don't think there was anything maybe more noble than that. Maybe it was a bit of an accident, but this just has no extra throughput. All this is better at is storing trains, and I don't know why I ever thought otherwise. But we could improve the throughput if we had enough room to build a bridge over there. So, it's just, and I don't have enough room to build a bridge because that's going to be in the way. However, if I did that, and then I were to go for that. I worry that a UFO might have been built at some point, but they just have no idea whether it's there or not. Oh, Bournemouth. Oh, the service is so frequent there that I could just wibble along and it'll probably fix itself quite quickly. I don't think they set out to do this great democratization of computers, but they still did it. That, I guess, is the important thing, is that whether or not they intended just to build things. And I think I'm probably being a bit harsh there, because if you look at a lot of Sir Clive's later stuff, he was very, very much attempting to be a futurologist, and this is a thing that's been a shame with a lot of the obituaries of Sir Clive, because they've concentrated on the period after he had his really great success, and sort of concentrated on the gawky and awkward things, and some of those weren't even that as unsuccessful as you might think. So the good example here is the Sinclair Microvision, the television. I can remember people having those. They probably didn't sell as well as they were supposed to, but they did have a bit of popularity. But yes, it is slightly a shame to see so much of the press around Sir Clive has been talked about. Oh yes, the C5, the silly little electric trike, wasn't that a bit of a failure? But it really was. This was something that kind of, there we go. Local authority rating, good enough. That will do. That I think it was the unfortunate thing of being just that little bit too far ahead of his time. Now, will this do this sensibly, or will this go? No, that cannot do it sensibly because I need to demolish that house, which Bournemouth will not let me do. Can I bribe them? Yeah. Which was he was trying to apply that same thought of making things, cheaply and effectively to the future of mobility. And yes, it didn't work out. It was just you couldn't do it. We've seen that it took until the 2010s really for the electric car to be made viably as something that people would buy. But yes, it is a shame to see that sort of tendency to paint him as as not so successful in later life, which is a shame. I feel it underestimates the really important contribution to so many people's life that early 8-bit era made. And I know I go back to them. You go back to them now, and a lot of the games that you fondly remember, they're awful. The keyboard layouts are terrible. We were like, what are the keys for this game? Oh, it's 0, I, A, V, and for some reason half the right-hand side of the keyboard. And there's a lot of those were created by kind of people kind of doing what I'm doing now, which is just sitting in the back of a bedroom. But again, it was kind of in an era where Transport Tycoon, I guess, is one of the last examples of that. So largely, yes, there's more than one person, but it was kind of just Chris Sawyer and Simon Foster doing the graphics, and John Broomhall did the music, and then that was kind of it. And that was kind of coming to the end of an era when you could be a single developer and you could make a game and you could get it out onto shelves and sell it. And so that was something that kind of, again, came in that sort of democratization of computing era. And nowadays, look at things like GTA, and it's just there's no way you as a single person could produce a game like that. You were permanently sort of confined to being an indie dev, and incidentally, coming full circle, there are indie devs who these days who make Spectrum games. I did have the chance to play one a little while back, which was quite a nostalgic experience. They've got slightly better at keyboard layouts now. But anyway, this has been a rather long ramble, and I kind of just wanted to put out an episode out there for people who don't really like the RCT stuff, and ended up going on this sort of long ramble through Sinclair history and things like that, and being very disassociated. So it's something that I think I feel it's kind of nice to do. In a way, to be able to just go back and remember, someone who did have a long life, had a lot of success throughout that life as well, and for all the later inventions and things which didn't work out, that sort of period of 1970s through into early 1980s of Sinclair, it was just immensely productive, immensely clever, and the fact that they did ship products, they shipped immensely popular products as well. So I think people should concentrate on that period of early success, because I think some of the factors that were against Sir Clive later was partly where the computer industry went. The PC and commoditization, and the fact that it did become that these little sort of small British firms were competing against huge US firms as IBM, Microsoft, whoever, who just had so many more resources that they just overtook them. And companies like Sinclair couldn't keep up. You compare the sort of QL to the PC, and you see why I'm not playing this on a sort of 10th generation Sinclair QL rather than the PC. But for all that said, there those external factors that it was just a factor of that was the size of the market in Britain, and none of those British companies could really compete with the US companies when it came to the sort of next generations with much bigger investments required. I think the only ones who really eventually became successful was Acorn, and eventually going via ARM, which is that low power CPUs were such a niche, and then suddenly with mobile phones and tablets became not a niche, and they became a huge company off the back of that. But yes, and of course being just too visionary, and you see sort of the Sinclair Microvision, and then you consider the way that people use YouTube today on the go on their phones. It was just too far ahead of his time. He was envisioning things that just the technology was not there to build. And so, no, I think, yes, some of it was gawky and some of it was silly, and some of it didn't really work out. But I think that to kind of come at things from that angle is to not really pay true service to the fact that this stuff was really, really radically ahead in terms of not so much in what it was technically, but in terms of saying this is how people are going to live their lives in the future. Absolutely, and most definitely was. So there we go. That has been a rather long episode, but I've been rather glad to do it. It's been a nice thing to talk through this and not just spend most of my time trying to talk strategy or be endlessly silly. And I hope that you also, if you're watching this on the Sunday when I will probably put it out, that even if you're way too young and you sort of look back at this and go, well, you're talking about Pentiums. My first PC was a Core 2 Duo or something. Or why are you talking about these sort of old men and women who made the British computer industry a thing which happened so far in the past? It's like you may as well be listening to Toto for all the relevance it has. But I do hope that you will raise a glass to old Sir Clive wherever he is now, because he did have a tremendous impact on a lot of people, me included. And I shall leave that there and see you again in a slightly more normal and probably slightly shorter episode.